It is not exciting news for many that a factory has been closed down or workers have been made redundant. It happens everywhere in the world. It is also happening in Christchurch City. The clothing industry of Christchurch is one of the areas that has seen many closures and redundancies in recent years.
Probably about 10 years ago, there probably would have been about 30,000 employed in the clothing industry. Now, I believe we're down to 18,000.
I've been in most of the clothing trade most of my life, except for when my boys were growing up. And I'd been with Macpac 20 years. And now I'm working at Cookie Time, making Christmas cookies.
The most obvious question about workers' redundancies and factory closures is why is it happening?
The cost of labour, the cost of running a business here, the overheads are too high to allow us to compete with the other brands in the markets.
We get paid, where I am, we get paid $11.15 an hour, and they can go over to China and get somebody that works for 50 cents an hour, so we just can't compete.
The bottom line is cheap labour.
Cheap labour was always available, but how is it that it has become so important and accessible? Now, various industries find it easy to relocate to places where they can find cheap labour. What are the other factors and influences behind this relocating bandwagon?
Since 1989, there have been sort of consistent closures within the clothing industry, and 20,000 workers from that industry have lost their jobs. Started with the government cutting tariffs on clothing, which made it impossible for many of the small local firms to compete with sweatshop labour in the third world mainly.
The most effective means by any effectively Western industrialised country has been to retain a level of protection for the industries against trading partners. Now, the single most effect it's had on employment in New Zealand has been attributed to tariff reductions, which was simply a tax on imported garments.
Cutting tariffs is perhaps one of the most common steps towards economic liberalisation that countries have been taking. What is the basic ideology behind this?
Part of the globalisation agenda is to remove all barriers to free trade and investment. They consider tariffs to be one of those barriers, so the ability for local governments to protect their own workers and their own industries are stripped away within that agenda.
The first thing one needs to think about is what globalisation means. In an economic sense, that has led to the opening of borders. And so what's happened is that a lot of textile manufacturing has moved to the south, the developing countries, third world, where labour is a lot cheaper.
The word globalisation sounds really good, but what is the future of local and small business in this big picture?
So on the one hand, it is an opportunity for people to go global, to actually, rather than just be a small local business, to become a global business. That's clearly, from a business point of view, that's clearly an opportunity. But if you just think small and local, then it could be a threat. On the other hand, I think there will always be, I believe, an opportunity for small local businesses to survive or to thrive under the scheme.
Globalisation has been designed by the mega capitalists, the big transnational corporations. It's designed, and the institutions within it are designed to benefit their production, their ability to grow. The only way they can do that is by decimating small manufacturing, small local businesses who get in their way. And we've seen that time and time again, even within New Zealand, and locally owned firms like The Warehouse who go into smaller towns and set up the big red store, and then the local businesses collapse. Well, that happens on a global scale with transnational corporations doing the same thing.
It is often said that the relocation of industries is only limited to the manufacturing sector, but there is an immense potential for growth in the service sector. Is it really going to happen?
Manufacturing is a phase that we tend to have gone through. So I believe that the economy will just shift from, and I'm just believing what the economists are saying really, that as manufacturing goes offshore, then we become much more service-based.
With moving your manufacturing offshore, is yes, you get cheaper labour, but you move your base away from bringing the profits of your labours back into New Zealand, so it makes it harder for the money that is gained from manufacturing to be spent on things like research and development. And sooner or later, I think, as companies move offshore and benefit from that cheaper labour, they'll then move their other operations offshore as well, because that inevitably makes more sense.
From the consumer's point of view, there is an argument that the tariff cuts and relocation of factories are going to make products such as clothing cheaper.
Because the cost of the product will be lower than it is at the moment. The quality will actually be the same or a little bit higher, because we have absolutely no intention of compromising on the quality. So what it means is that we'll be able to put out the same or higher quality product we are now at a cheaper price.
The argument about cheaper clothing, it is only better because the Labor government and the previous National government have done what they've done and put so many people on the poverty line. It's all those people can afford to buy. They can't buy good quality New Zealand made garments.
Yes, it has meant that, especially in the clothing line, prices have come down. The quality has certainly fallen as well. But the suggestion now is that there will be a minor percentage decrease in the cost of clothing once the tariffs start coming off in 2005. But the decrease in jobs will mean that there are more people on the breadline who have less money to spend on clothes anyway.
Workers are the most affected due to factory closures. What happens to them after losing their jobs? Are they able to find the same kind of work or salary structure?
I was really concerned about our staff and what would happen to them if we closed down the production. But as it turned out, almost all of them have got jobs already.
I was quite disappointed because I was a loyal worker there. I was quite disappointed at the outcome and how they treated us that were made redundant. Yeah, it was basically, thanks for your time, goodbye.
There would be certainly not enough jobs to replace those that have gone. And the difficulty is, under the current regime, in terms of welfare support, you don't have any ability to, as a woman, to be able to, if you're in a relationship, de facto relationship, or your husband's working, to claim any benefit support. It's just not available. And so that's going to have a huge impact on those families, actually. And they have to find some sort of alternative work, perhaps in the service industry or something like that. But that's not easy when you've had a skill set, you've worked in the industry for 10, 20, 30 years, and you know that skill very well, to then upskill when you're in your mid-40s to mid-50s. It's very, very difficult.
I applied for a job similar to what I was doing, but nowhere near the money that I was getting at Macpac.
And I mean, if you've got somebody who's just sat at a machine for 30 years and just done one job, what hope is there for that person to actually retrain? In what area?
It's obviously hit textile clothing workers very hard. Many of them live in provincial areas where there are very few other job opportunities, and particularly Maori and Pacific women who tend to have jobs in the textile and clothing area. So, and again, they find it very difficult to find other jobs there. So it has been extremely hard for many of those workers.
What is the future of the clothing industry and its workers?
You often see advertisements in the paper for experienced machinists. And a number of people who are experienced machinists or cutters or other, work in other industries, other occupational groups in our industry are really reluctant to sort of keep working in the industry because of the worry about the effects of tariffs and the preceding redundancies.
I think they might end up with a country with a lot of unskilled people, or they'll find a lot of their skilled people will go offshore.
Well, it'll just disappear, like the motor industry. We'll just close down just one by one. And the sad thing about it is that 90% of the people that work in the clothing industry are actually women. And if we actually lose our jobs, probably about 70% of them have already got partners that are working, so they won't qualify for any social welfare handout, so they're not even going to appear on their statistics. So we just disappear.